So 3, 2, 1, you are live. Please start.
So, a very warm good evening to everybody, and we extend a warm welcome from on the behalf of Mankind and in collaboration with Bruna Hill to the presentation of the first ever survey on the scope of telemedicine in India. Let me tell you, this is a pan-India patient survey which we had conducted in the month of August, and why this survey is relevant. Telemedicine has gained a lot of significance post-COVID. It was something which was started way back in the year 2001, but had not been flourishing that way. If we talk about the usage post-COVID, then post-COVID telemedicine has gained a lot of importance. Doctors are there. Most of us understand the perspective, what the doctors do and feel about telemedicine. But there has been one fraternity about which there was a very limited information which was available, and that is the patients. And as we all are there, the medical practitioners are dedicated to the patients. We as a pharma company look into the interests of the patients. So we thought that why not to understand that what do the patients in India actually think and feel about telemedicine? What is the perspective of the patient? So I will begin my presentation and take you through the facts which we observed and which we collated during this survey. So this survey started with around more than 3,200 respondents. We had enrolled to, over 4,000 people, and out of them we had close to 3,200, more than 3,200 responses. So let me first of all share what have been the objectives of the survey. The prime objective of the survey has been to review the current adoption of telemedicine in India. What is the adoption rate? How many people are actually using telemedicine? What do they think and feel about telemedicine? Because people have been used to consult doctors in person. Then the second most important aspect which we worked upon was to understand what is the experience of the existing telemedicine users. Are they comfortable using telemedicine, or they still feel that there are aspects which need improvement? And most importantly, since telemedicine is here to stay, we also wanted to assess what is the expectation of the patients with regard to telemedicine and its growing scope in the future. So as I said, this survey we had enrolled more than 3,200 respondents. And if you look at the age group of the respondents, it is a varied age group. It is somewhere ranging from 21 years to 92 years of age. Everybody knows that metros, the economic strata, the knowledge of the people, the education level of the people is higher, and there are much more better medical facilities in metros compared to non-metros. So particularly, it is always expected that in metros that telemedicine is there to flourish. But we also wanted to understand that what is the thinking of people, thinking of respondents or patients who are living in non-metros. So deliberately, we had covered more than 250 plus cities across 25 states in the countries, and we had chosen almost 70% of non-metro towns. Now talking about the income strata of the people, we thought that we need to understand the income strata of every income group. So we had a wide range, which was even less than 5 lakhs, or people who were earning more than 50 lakhs per annum. So this survey comprises of 80% of people who belong to the middle class. So if we talk about the demography, if we talk about the choice of the cities, the choice of the age, and the income strata, this survey we have tried in our best to define every parameter to the best. Now, as I discussed, that we had respondents from over 250 cities across to more than 25 states across the country. Now, if you look, we had covered 30% of the metro cities, which include Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad, and 70% of non-metro cities. So as you can see here, this is just a pictorial depiction of the response that we had generated across 25 plus states. Now, talking about the most important aspect, which is the key takeaways from the survey. Very surprising fact. Telemedicine adoption post-COVID has increased by almost 3 times. There is a threefold increase in the adoption and usage of telemedicine post-COVID. And one of the most important, perhaps the most important factor for the drive that people have been attracted toward telemedicine is a perceived risk of infection. People feel that if they go and consult a doctor in person, they will have to wait, they will have to travel, and there is a high risk of infection. And the most important point, out of every 3 users, 2 users consulted with their existing known doctors. Keeping these things in mind, the 3 facts which I have shared with everybody, it becomes very important that every medical practitioner has his own platform and he is able to set up his own virtual clinic. This becomes very, very critical. Now, talking about few expectations of the patients with regard to the future of telemedicine, people want that they should have health records easily accessible, they should get reminders, and the cost of telemedicine should be low. These are the key expectations of the patients. Very important aspect, though it is mentioned at the bottom, but it is very, very important that out of 10 respondents, 8 respondents confirmed their willingness to use telemedicine again in the future. And these are the things which we had never analyzed in the month of March when COVID was spreading its wings throughout the country. Now, in last 4 or 5 months, the things have changed. And believe me, telemedicine, which has come out as a major finding of this survey, is that telemedicine is here to stay. Now, if you look at this latest press update on in June from WHO, telemedicine has become a global trend. Not only the high income countries, but even the countries which have low income of the population, they are seeing a rise in teleconsultation. Globally, 58% of the countries are now using telemedicine to replace in-person consultation. And a very surprising fact that even in lower income countries, this figure is close to 42%. This clearly shows that telemedicine has now become a global trend. Whatsoever be the reason, be it the convenience of the patient, be it the fear of the pandemic, but telemedicine is here to stay globally. And India being a very, very big market for all economic activity, telemedicine is going to flourish in the country. This is the brief of the contents which we intend to discuss today. Number 1 being the adoption of telemedicine, where we shall be discussing about the patient demographics, the doctor specialties, the types of disease and conditions where patients have been using telemedicine. Then very importantly, the second point, the patient preferences, the doctor type, the technology format which the patients are actually using, and their preferred day and timing. Then we have certain testimonials, experience, expectations, and feedback from the patients. And then I will be before we conclude, we shall be sharing the methodology of the survey. So I will move ahead with the adoption of telemedicine in India. Now, as we discussed, as I had highlighted during the key takeaways, telemedicine adoption has grown up by almost 3 times post-COVID. And most importantly, 24% of the respondents said that they had used telemedicine at least once in the past. Out of the respondents that we have got responses generated from, 53% of the respondents have shown their willingness to use telemedicine in the future. So it becomes important that not only the usage has grown 3-fold, but there is a part of the population which has not only experienced telemedicine once, but most of them are willing to use telemedicine in the future. The details of this I will be sharing in my subsequent slides. Now, as I highlighted in the beginning, we often thought that the adoption rates are going to be very, very high in the metros, considering the economic background, considering the education level of the people, and considering the higher medical infrastructure available in the metros. But what came to us as a surprise is that non-metros are catching up faster. If we look, if the growth rate of metros and non-metros is concerned with regard to the telemedicine, we will find that non-metros are growing at a higher rate as far as adoption of telemedicine is concerned. Metros definitely are growing, but it's a very surprising fact. And non-metros, which never gain so much importance in terms of any activity, they have a higher adoption rate of telemedicine. The growth rate of telemedicine in non-metros is higher than the metros. Then comes a very important finding from the survey, which is regard to the genders. As we can see, there is hardly any difference among the genders. Both males and females have been using telemedicine equally, because it is more of a personal choice of an individual. It does not depend upon the gender, and various specialties are consulted during telemedicine. Now, a very important observation with regard to the telemedicine users, if we consider their age, the highest adoption of telemedicine has been in the age group 21 to 60 years. And over 60 years also, if we see, 21% of the respondents have been exposed to telemedicine, or they have been using telemedicine. So what comes as a take-home message from this slide, that both the males, females, irrespective of the gender, the usage of telemedicine is increasing, and there is no limitation of the age group, across age groups. Probably the 0 to 20 years, maybe the parents have consulted for their kids. So across age groups, telemedicine is gaining significance. Now, this is a very important slide which shows the reasons why patients are moving towards telemedicine. Now, what comes as an important finding is that patients are proactively looking for telemedicine solutions, and it is not a forced lookout for the usage of telemedicine. It is not that it has been, say, forced by certain external factors. As you can see, 55% of the respondents said that it is their personal choice. So this clearly shows that the usage of telemedicine is governed by the personal choice of an individual, though there may be external factors as well, which I will be explaining in my subsequent slide. But most importantly, the usage of telemedicine is a personal choice of the patient or the respondent. Now, if we talk, what has motivated the people to move towards telemedicine? And if we discuss various factors which will attribute to the personal choice, the most important one is the perceived risk of infection while going and consulting their known doctor in the clinic. Because 70% of the respondents feel that if they go out and meet their doctor personally, there are chances that they will be having exposure, they will be having a lot of human interaction, and there are chances that they will catch the infection. There have been certain important external conditions and doctor suggestions which we might consider as external factors. But one of the most important external factor was that clinics of the doctors were closed during the lockdown. So the patient did not have access to the doctors. So out of their personal choice, the fear of getting infected, and because the doctors were not available, they chose telemedicine. So the primary trigger has been the risk of infection. And let me again repeat, usage of telemedicine is governed by the personal choice as far as this survey finding. Now, as we discussed that there are people who have used telemedicine. Now, what about the repeat usage? How has been the experience of people who have witnessed or experienced telemedicine? What do they feel that whether they will be using it in the future? So out of the respondents where we got responses, 46% of the respondents have used telemedicine at least once, and 54% of the respondents has used telemedicine more than once. So the major finding is that people are willing to have repeat usage of telemedicine. They don't want to, that clearly means their experience or the outcome that was generated in terms of the medical treatment which they got from telemedicine has been good. So obviously their usage of telemedicine was more than once. And this is the kind of population which will not only influence other people who are among their friends, colleagues or family members, but they will also again go and they will again vouch for telemedicine. So 54% of the telemedicine users have used it more than once in the recent past. As we talked about the willingness to continue in the future. So you see, telemedicine is here to stay, and it is a fact that it will become an integral part of the Indian healthcare. Why I say so? Because if we look at the responses from the respondent, more than 77% of the respondents are willing to use telemedicine in the future. Now, the below graph, if we see, which is highlighting the key reason for choosing online doctor consultation in the future as well. This I will be taking up in the subsequent slides also with a lot of detail. But perceived risk of infection may also drive the future use of telemedicine. Maybe the illness is non-critical, so they feel that they can get easy consultation from the comfort of their home. And 49% of the respondents said that it saves travel and time. This is very, very important. They don't have to wait in the queues. They don't have to travel. It not only saves the time, but it saves the cost also. And If we talk about the user experience with telemedicine, almost 60% of the users had reported high rate of satisfaction with their telemedicine experience. This is a very, very big number. If we say 60% of users, because it depends upon the various factors, net connectivity, camera quality. So we believe that 60% of the people are highly convinced with the outcome or the experience which they gained with regard to the consultation with their practitioner during telemedicine. Now, this is a slide which particularly talks about the future of telemedicine. And this finding is based upon the outcome of the survey. While we see that we have seen that the risk of getting infected has been a trigger in past, it is continuing in the present. But one of the major aspects which came across as a finding in this survey was that telemedicine also saves time and is convenient. So even if all of us believe and all of us are hopeful that COVID will not stay for long, we are going to get freedom from this pandemic. But even after that, for the sake of convenience, for the sake of saving time, people are going to use telemedicine, which is clearly evident and a proven fact which we got from this survey. So convenience and saving time will make telemedicine very, very popular in the coming future or near future at least. So now we have talked and discussed about people who have used telemedicine. We talked that it was based upon the personal choice of the respondents that they opted for telemedicine. But one very important finding with regard to the people who had not used telemedicine, the survey finding clearly states that 62% of the respondents did not use telemedicine because their family doctor was not using any telemedicine. That means if their preferred doctor, if the doctor whom they trusted, their family doctor, they had a telemedicine platform, these class of patients would have also gone for telemedicine. So it clearly states that if we talk about the medical practitioner as well as the patient relationship, it is based upon trust. Patients want to move to those doctors whom they trust, and if they are not doing telemedicine, they will possibly not use telemedicine, or at a later stage, if the disease pushes them, if the conditions push them, they will have to vouch for other doctors. So this clearly means that it is going to be a loss for doctors. They might lose their patients if they are not using any telemedicine system. Now, talking about the patient preferences, we found that this is a very important finding. Almost close to 70% of the patients or the respondents wanted to consult their known doctors, or they had consulted their known doctors via telemedicine. So it again becomes important, as I stated, that since people want to opt for their known doctors, it becomes important that every doctor has a virtual platform or has a virtual clinic which is supported by some app or the other. So again, I repeat, it's a very important finding that 70% of the users who did online consultation went to their known doctors. They did not search the doctors. You see the usage of telemedicine with those doctors whom they did not know based upon social media is only 5%. Internet search is contributing to only 14%. So known doctors are a preference and the first choice of their patient. Now, if you talk about the primary usage of teleconsultation or where else the teleconsultation can be used, we found that more than 60% of the patients, they had used telemedicine as a follow-up consultation. Maybe these patients were having some cardiac problem, diabetic problem, some metabolic disorders. That is why they did not want to take the risk, and they felt that the personal visit to the doctor might not be required. That is why they chose follow-up consultation through telemedicine. So this is a very important finding, and this also states that telemedicine is there to stay. And once these patients had got an experience, preferably if the disease is not that serious, they just want to do a follow-up, they will consult their known doctors through some telemedicine platform. Now, most of the patients, as we said, that we had taken patients who were from the middle class. Most of these people were working class. So they had a preferred time their times or preferences with regard to teleconsultation. Most of the patients preferred either the timing from 10 a.m. to 12 noon or 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. because they felt that this time was very convenient. If we see the majority of the respondents, there is hardly any difference between the morning slot choice made by the people or the patients who have made the evening slot as their choice. So the preferred timing is either in the morning from 10 a.m. to 12 noon or in the evening 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Now, talking about the platform which the patients will prefer. So it came out as a very important finding of the survey that patient did not have any preferred choice of the technology platform being used for teleconsultation. They were willing to use any platform. They were willing to use any platform which was being used by their doctor or by their hospital. Many patients, if we see, they had used WhatsApp. They had probably used WhatsApp because their doctors, many of their doctors had a preference for WhatsApp, or they were using WhatsApp for teleconsultation because many of during the times of COVID, because the access to the services was limited. So even doctors did not have access to technology platforms. So many doctors had moved towards WhatsApp consultation. But let us talk about the findings of this survey with regard to the WhatsApp consultation. As I said, patients will prefer any platform which is used by their practitioners. But though they use WhatsApp, but patients were not satisfied by using WhatsApp because they felt that there were many challenges in the usage of WhatsApp. There was no appointment reminder. There was no payment option. WhatsApp, they believe that's for personal use. There is no storage of medical reports. And most of the patients said that they were uncomfortable for making patients the payments as well as refunds. One of the patients also stated, who was having a 8-month-old pregnancy, she said that there is a risk of privacy. Privacy is at stake, and there is a possibility that other might look at their health reports also. So though patients might have used WhatsApp because certain doctors were using WhatsApp, they were not satisfied with the usage of WhatsApp. Now, talking about the future, what are the expectations of the patients with telemedicine with regard to the future? Patients want that they should get an access to their complete records. They should have lower cost of consultation, and the prescription they should get digitally because it is easier to store the prescription and they can easily go and purchase their medicine. So these are certain future expectations or top expectations that patients have with regard to telemedicine. Other patients responded that they want certain kind of reminders, education material, but the top expectations were records, low cost, as well as access to digital prescription. Now, these are some of the patient quotes and testimonials. I will quickly take everyone through. This is an important one for a patient with a neurological disorder in a metro town who gave a score of 8.5 out of 10 to telemedicine. And the patient said, it helped in follow-up. When I take my grandmother, who is a neuro patient, to OPD, she is sometimes not very alert after taking her medicine, resulting in improper diagnosis. With telemedicine, I can consult at the time when my grandmother is most active. This is a very important point. Even the diagnosis per se has forced a patient to use telemedicine. It is easy to use and everything went well. Had problems with video since it required strong network. So maybe patients are, as I said, that it's a technology-based model. So patients might require a good usage of technology, but most of the technology patients are using in mobile phones or the network, they are sound enough to give a good experience with telemedicine. And then a patient with back pain in a non-metro town who gives the score of 8 out of 10 to telemedicine says the experience was wonderful and the medicines worked well. Although doctor was in a hurry and he could have given more time, though he prescribed proactively. That means telemedicine was as effective as a personal one-to-one consultation with the doctor. Now, as I said, convenience is going to be one of the factors which is going to have a long-lasting effect over the usage of telemedicine and the growth of telemedicine in India. This is a quote from a patient with a chronic condition. Telemedicine is future. Even specialized doctors are saying so. Can use it from comfort of my home, receive prescriptions and get medicines. If I am able to get good doctors in off hours, I would go for teleconsultation. I will do teleconsultation since I don't have to carry my children to the clinic. Every time as there is no one to handle them at home. I will go for a face-to-face consultation only if the problem is critical. That means saving time, convenience, getting access to their doctors, getting a good advice from the comfort of their home is driving the patients and is going to drive the patients to use or opt for telemedicine in the future. Now, these are certain things, quotes for the patients who had certain expectations, and this highlights the key expectation from a teleconsultation. Right, I consulted a doctor and he prescribed medicine for 1 week, but telemedicine app closed the consultation in 3 days. I have to pay for follow-up each time. There is a gap in. So there are certain gaps as well, which most of the, I think there are organizations who are practicing telemedicine, who are providing these applications. They are looking at this and they are working on that. Doctors focus on sending telemedicine, sending medicine details online. If doctors can also share the diagnosis and add description, that would be helpful. Other relevant information will be welcome too. Simple interface and reminders is important. Regional Hindi language will be easy. So if you talk about a teleconsultation app should have a futuristic view. It should keep all these expectations of the patients in mind, so that a teleconsultation experience becomes a very, very good and a lasting experience, and as good as a personal consultation for a patient. Now, as we discussed that certain medical practitioners, as they had no choice, they had to use WhatsApp. So these are certain important quotes on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is uncomfortable for doctor, payments and refunds. WhatsApp involves risk of privacy, others looking at our health report. So though patients had used WhatsApp in certain cases because they had no choice left, given a choice with a better teleconsultation platform, they might not opt for WhatsApp consultation. Now, I would just like to share the backup methodology with you before we conclude. We had circulated this survey to over 4,200 people. We had more than 3,200 complete responses. There were more than 20 plus questions. We had covered all 25 plus states. We had done in-depth interviews. There were almost 24 in-depth interviews with an average time of 30 to 45 minutes with a mix of metro and not metro, chronic and non-chronic elements to understand, design this survey so that this survey outcome is not only very holistic, but it also reflects the facts in the real way. We had done extensive online research, including all the available data and the statistics which we could get from the health tech companies. The vendor which we had been using, who had conducted this research on our behalf, they had Clinetics app usage, which had witnessed more than 20,000 teleconsultation. So also data was used to understand that how easy is or how difficult is the use of telemedicine. Then these are certain important insights that we got from the review of the literature, which we thought that we should share, because these are neutral and these are findings based upon long-term research across, not only across the country, but across the globe. 70% of the telemedicine users were first-time users. Almost approximately 2 online consultations have been realized per user per month. More than 50% of the consultations were with GP, Obs, Gynae and Derma. That means people prefer telemedicine for non-critical ailments. And there has been a growth in mental health consultation during the time of the COVID. And West Bengal, Bihar, UP and Jharkhand, these states have witnessed a high growth in teleconsultation. So I hope everybody not only must have paid a very close attention to the findings of the survey, but you will also appreciate this is the first ever survey which is talking about the perspective of Indian patients. And as we all know, India is a diversified country with different level of economic activity, different culture, different strata across once we move from one state to the other. But one thing which comes out as a fact, that irrespective of the state, irrespective of the social economic status of the respondent, irrespective of the education level of the respondent, people are willing to use telemedicine, and telemedicine is not going to be a short-term affair. It will not last only till the time COVID is there. Telemedicine in India is there to stay. Before I hand over the session to Dr. Rajat, you must be seeing 2 poll options there. One poll option is with regard to the Dona Health, that if you want access to the Dona Health, you can consult the Mankind team. you can give your option as yes, and our people will be contacting you. And if you require a full detailed report of this survey, there is an option given there. Please click on the yes button, and our team will provide you this entire detailed report for your future reference in a hard copy or a PDF version immediately. So, Dr. Rajat, over to you for the panel discussion with our esteemed panelists. Thank you very much.
If you could stop sharing your slides, Abhishek.
Yeah.
Let me share these slides once. Are the slides visible?
Yes, Dr. Rajat.
Yeah, so thank you, Abhishek, for sharing with us the insights from the first ever Indian survey conducted to gather the patients' perspectives and defining their needs from telemedicine in Indian scenario. Good evening, everyone, once again, and Mankind Pharma welcomes you all to this panel discussion on doctors' perspective on the emerging trends in telemedicine in India. This ongoing global crisis has forced healthcare institutions and regulatory bodies to turn to alternative ways of providing healthcare while limiting exposure to the virus. The COVID-19 pandemic has ignited telemedicine adoption, progressing the technology much further along than expected. As rightly said by our Honorable President, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the developed India will not be a nation of cities. It will be a network of prosperous villages empowered by telemedicine, teleeducation, and e-commerce. Let me introduce our moderator and panel of experts for today's exciting panel discussion. Our moderator for today's session is none other than Professor K. Ganpati, who has been working relentlessly from 1999 for the growth and development of telemedicine in India. The slides are not moving actually.
Sir, please click onto the slide once and then you can click move. So you can click on to stop share and you can again share the slides.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
So please click on to the slideshow button so it will come in full screen.
Yeah, I'm clicking, but it is not coming. So what I'll do, I'll read it out. I have the CV details. So our moderator for this session is none other than Professor K. Ganpati, who has been working relentlessly from 1999 for the growth and development of telemedicine in India. He's the past president, Telemedicine Society of India and Neurological Society of India. He's an emeritus professor at Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University and a digital health expert, WHO. He's a member, editorial board, and reviewer for national and international journals in telemedicine and neurosurgery. And he has published 19 chapters and 98 scientific papers in index journals. He has presented 535 papers in India and 178 overseas. He is the director of Apollo Telemedicine Networking Foundation and Apollo Telehealth Services. Welcome, Dr. K. Ganpati. Our first expert panelist is Dr. Mridubhashini Govindrajan, a renowned gynecologist and IVF specialist. Madam is the clinical director at Women's Center, Coimbatore, and Madam graduated from Stanley Medical College, Chennai, and got her PG training at University of Manitoba, Canada. She is a teaching faculty at University Teaching Hospitals in Winnipeg, Canada. She's a former associate professor, PSGIMS NR, and a former adjunct professor, Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, Chennai. Madam has been an invited speaker at a number of national and international conferences, and she has been bestowed with several awards and honors. Lifetime Achievement Award from Dr. MGR Medical University, for the Sake of Honor Award from Rotary Clubs of Coimbatore, Best Woman Entrepreneur Award from Coimbatore Management Association, Inspiring Gynecologist of India 2018 from the Times Group, Lifetime Achievement Award from COGS and IMA Coimbatore. And Madam is the author of several publications, and she's a member of ISAR, ESHRE, ASRM, FOXY, IMA, and CII Healthcare Panel. Welcome, Dr. Midhubhashini Govindarajan. Our second expert panelist is Dr. K.D. Modi, a renowned endocrinologist. Sir is a senior consultant at CARE Hospital, Nampalli, Hyderabad. He's a guide for DNB endocrinology students. Sir is an ex-treasurer, Endocrine Society of India, and General Secretary, Hyderabad Society of Endocrinology. He has authored and co-authored 79 papers and delivered orations at numerous national and international platforms, like 2013 ESI Endo Society of India, international academic conferences like US Endo Conference 2014 at Houston, and RSSDI 2013 for bariatric surgery and diabetes mellitus remission. Welcome, Dr. Modi. Our third expert panelist is Dr. Bhupen N. Desai, a renowned consulting cardiologist. Sir is a consulting cardiologist at Desai Heart Care Clinic, Borivali West, Mumbai, and he's a gold medalist in MBBS with diploma in cardiology. Sir did his MD from PGI Chandigarh and DNB and DM cardiology. He's a fellow of American College of Cardiology, fellow of European Society of Cardiology, and has over 25 years of experience in cardiology practice. He is attached to Holy Family, BACS, and Karuna Hospital, Mumbai, and ex-attachments with Wadia, Bombay, and Nanavati Hospital. He's an ex-cardiologist, Larsen and Toubro, and Bristol Myers Squibb, and ex-senior cardiologist, Cardiac Safety, Quintiles Research. Welcome, Dr. Desai. I welcome all our moderator, Professor K. Ganpati, and our esteemed panel of experts on behalf of Mankind Pharma. And I would now request Professor K. Ganpati to take over the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rajat, for organizing this virtual program. In 2000, when I started giving talks in telemedicine, I used to introduce myself as one belonging to the BC era. For when I qualified in 1980 as a neurosurgeon, there was no CT scan in India. Before computers and before Christ were one and the same. 2 decades later, I am a self-taught telemedicine enthusiast who introduced telemedicine again in the BC era. The BC now, however, refers to before Corona. The first 15 years was spent in just creating awareness and evangelization. During the next 5 years, there was a slow but steady annual incremental growth aided by the deployment of telemedicine in major public-private partnership projects in several states. The sheer size of India makes telemedicine an absolute necessity. Just to give an example, in March 2015, I published an article where I proved that 938 million Indians lived in areas where there was not a single neurologist or neurosurgeon. The numbers may differ, but this is true for most specialties and super specialties in India and is likely to continue certainly even during the lifetime of my grandchildren. Virtual teleconsults is therefore the only solution. In March 2020, a strand of RNA acted as the Chief Global Transformation Officer and within a few months made telehealth a household term on this planet. The world woke up. The world turned upside down. Those of us who for 2 decades had been imploring, impleading, beseeching, entreating, and pleading for the use of telemedicine were suddenly recognized. Distance today has become meaningless. Geography has become history. Physical distancing and contactless medicine has left no choice to every stakeholder in the ecosystem. The growth of any discipline anywhere in the world depends on political will and support. The notification of the telemedicine practice guidelines by the MCI on March 25th, 2020 was the endorsement which the Telemedicine Society of India was eagerly waiting for. The repeated announcements by the Prime Minister of India requesting the use of telemedicine had the much desired effect. The recent announcement from the National Digital Health Commission notifying commencement of health ID cards, doctors' DigiLockers, etc., will ensure that telemedicine will no longer be desperately knocking at hitherto closed doors. Telemedicine, ladies and gentlemen, will soon be center stage and incorporated into the core of the healthcare delivery system of India. Every crisis offers an opportunity. I am confident that in my lifetime, I will see technology-enabled remote healthcare a reality. Who knows? My great-grandson, as yet unborn, may even ask me 15 years later, "You mean your patient was really sitting in front of you?" I just don't believe it. Believe me, this is not science fiction. I could go on and on, but I do know the time is limited. And now it is my privilege to talk to Dr. Mirudabashini Govindaraj, whom I know for several decades. Before handing over the floor to her, I just wanted to make a small observation. Long before COVID-19, the American College of Gynecologists had made a national task force on telehealth for obstetrics and gynecology. I'm not sure if there is one in India now from the obstetricians. The Indian Psychiatric Society have a month ago developed and published telepsychiatry guidelines for India. Similarly, guidelines now exist for psychologists for telecounseling. I have requested, as a past president, I have requested the Neurological Society of India and the Indian Academy of Neurology for their assistance in producing such guidelines. 70,000 OB specialists, gynecology specialists are insufficient to cater to at least 350 million women requiring their services. Like all specialties, I'm sure in OG also, there is a lopsided distribution and an urban-rural health divide. I'm sure Dr. Mirudabashini will be touching on antenatal care, remote fetal heart monitoring, tele-ultrasound monitoring of the growing fetus, evaluating high-risk pregnancies, postpartum follow-up, etc. Madam, I would also like you to spend a minute or two on how telemedicine can evaluate pregnant women who are COVID positive. Incidentally, we at the Apollo hospitals did tele-cervical cancer screening of almost 100 women at 14,500 feet height in the Himalayas, where the temperature was minus 25 degrees centigrade. Our OG specialists have given about 2,000 teleconsultations in the last 3 years in various public-private partnerships for several state governments. I understand from them that picking up anemia, gestational diabetes, hypertension, and preeclampsia was particularly useful when done remotely. Hundreds of articles have been published on mHealth and various other aspects of telemedicine, but I would like to listen directly from the person who's using it. Madam, you have 300 seconds now. Your time starts now.
Madam, if you could unmute, please unmute yourself, madam.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Madam.
OBGYN historically has been known as sort of a sleepy subject where people absorb technology very late, but actually the truth is very contrary. And I can point out to you that using ultrasound in all of medicine started with obstetricians and gynecologists. Somebody thought in the 50s and 60s that the baby in the uterus was very close to an underwater scanning for which ultrasound was being used. That's how ultrasound came to be used in clinical medicine. And today, you know where it stands. And the same way laparoscopy and creating a pneumoperitoneum was started by obstetrician gynecologists. So I think we are pretty much into this field right at this point in time worldwide. And I'll also point out to the fact that I'm probably the only one of the panelists who's from a Tier 2 city, and dealing with Tier 3 city patients and patients who are away from us, patients in villages. Coimbatore pretty well caters to all of Nilgiris. So, and you pretty well know how much medical care Nilgiris and the Hattis and Hallis in Nilgiris have. So it is being extensively used already in OBGYN. And today it's being used so much worldwide that in OBGYN specialty, a phrase is being used, and the phrase says a clear and present future. That is telemedicine. It's a takeoff on clear and present danger, but the phrase that gets used is a clear and present future. And that's where it is. And it's already changing the way we are practicing, and the society is practicing as well everywhere, including states like Tamil Nadu, because it has become reachable. It is not only the reaches of Himalaya, in Nilgiris, in the mountains, it is not available. But today I can tell you Tamil Nadu has improved its maternal mortality rates and perinatal mortality rates by using telemedicine, and it's been happening prior to COVID. And a patient in a hatti in Nilgiris having a hemoglobin of 9 grams gets picked up by the supervisor in Coimbatore, and it conveyed to the health department in Chennai and gets taken care of. So that's how it is. That's how good the telemedicine is already in OBGYN. But anyway, I think there are 3 different areas where telemedicine is being used in 3 different ways. It's being used. It's from a consultant to a client or a patient straight. That is one part of it. Another part is from a consultant to a visiting doctor living in a smaller city, living in a remote area, helping them to manage a critical situation is the second part of it. And the third part of it is paramedical workers like ASHA workers who are in PHCs everywhere in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu has achieved a maternal mortality rate which is better than a lot of other states in Coimbatore by using technology. So, and what used to be Kerala was the leading place, and patients used to go from Tamil Nadu to Kerala in the border areas like Palghat and all. But now it's the other way around. They're coming into Tamil Nadu because the results are, the care that is giving is far, far better using technology. So these are 3 different things. And for an obstetrician gynecologist, we use it for obstetrics, we use it for gynecology, we use it for even reproductive medicine or infertility management. So 3 different areas we are covering as well. Traditional prenatal care, caring for low-risk pregnancies involved, and advised worldwide that 14 visits were needed from the time a pregnancy was diagnosed to the time the baby was delivered. That was the standard. That was recommended by textbooks and most societies. Now, even WHO agrees that 8 visits, 8 personal visits and 6 contacts are sufficient to produce similar kind of outcomes. And these outcomes now have been recorded. The first study was done in Mayo, and several other universities have come up with this using just 8 visits and 6 contacts. And it doesn't say 6 virtual contacts can give you exactly the same kind of results. So I think it is changed the way we can work, and it has been approved by world bodies now, WHO, FIGO, all of them accept this way of working rather than virtual actual contact every time. And they are divided into visits where you need to do a physical examination, where you need to do an ultrasound, where you need to do the testing, and also visits in between where just a contact and conversation and education is more important. Today, what we are doing is we are following that kind of a protocol with 8 visits for investigations or other things. And the rest of them are for contacts. So that is, that goes on. And also when we book a patient, we make sure that we have, as an institution, each gynecologist looks after their own patients. And we also have a physiotherapist providing 1 hour of prenatal exercises for them, and dietitian providing 1 hour dietary care for them. And we usually have a 1 hour session that is addressed to all of the booked patients by using telemedicine, which tells them of the course of the pregnancy, what they expect, how to look after themselves, what to do and what not to do. And we again repeat it at 35 weeks, preparing them for labor. We call it as a labor preparation classes. We give an introduction to labor and when to report to the hospital, how to report to the hospital and everything else. And I think it is taken very well by the patients, and I think patients are appreciating, because you really don't get to have that kind of a time, even when you make a personal visit to the hospital. And as you very well know, none of the pregnant women want to walk into a hospital where there's already COVID in the hospital situation. So I think it is helping us to do the prenatal care very well by leaps and bounds without compromising on any of the outcomes that can happen. High-risk pregnancies may be a bit more difficult, but high-risk pregnancies, situations such as GDM and hypertension in pregnancy, we can teach them to do sugars at home. We can teach them to do weights at home and BPs at home, and the contacts may be more common and more frequent, and we are able to look after them that as well. And besides that, we have situations where more problems arise, and then it's a call from maybe a referring physician to a higher level hospital where we can guide them through, say, a PPH. Sometimes those people may not have ever used things, the more current things like a Buckley balloon or intrauterine balloon to decrease the bleeding. It can be easily taught over the net, and it can be done, and that way it helps. And managing a situation like a septic shock and hemorrhagic shock or such things becomes, or a preeclampsia or eclampsia, becomes holding hands and getting them to do the right thing and advising them when to transport them and how to transport them makes life a lot better, even in very high risk situations. And people who go through normal pregnancies and deliveries and postpartum visits can be through a virtual visit as well, because what we're looking for is lactational problems, looking at the baby and whether the feeding pattern is okay, or those things can virtually be done by a teleconsultation. And newborn, the mothers with newborn babies appreciate it so much when they don't have to carry a newborn baby and travel in this kind of a situation, reach the hospital, wait for us and get seen by us. So many, many things can be done and are being done in a low risk situation as well as a high risk situation. Besides this, the diagnostic things also can be done. Ultrasound, as you said, fetal anomalies can be reassessed by ultrasound pictures. In the West, where technology is more available, it's a real-time thing. As they're doing it, they can monitor and ask for more cuts or ask more views. But here, I think we have to depend on the pictures, and that can be done. And when they're doing genetic screening, genetic abnormalities, and counseling for those kind of things, I think it's much better and easier to do them these days using teletechnology. Preterm labor can be, again, emergency management can be given, and patients can then turn up in the hospital. In a gynae consultation, there are many problems which can be managed, like diagnosed PCOS. It's counseling that's needed more than anything else. And the young women who are diagnosed of it can be guided quite easily through teleconsultation and decision-making, and even in pathologies like abnormal uterine bleeding, endometriosis, fibroids, all of that, when to operate, when not to operate. If you have a physician calling you, it's much easier, but even a patient with a good ultrasound picture, we can go through that and discuss all the clinical findings with them, and even provide interim medical management until we can see them in a safe environment back again. So in gynecology as well, it's coming very handy. Fertility management is another area we've started using it as well now, because it's again hand-holding in a lot of areas. And the only area that I sort of wanted to touch on is that home monitoring a fetal heart using a Doppler, and home monitoring using a fetal monitor. It's still questionable. Actually, none of the societies recommend it as yet. Most of the professional societies discourage you from using fetal monitors at home because it's likely to produce false results and give rise to, it's been known that maternal heartbeat can get picked up. There was a time when China was producing very cheap Doppler machines and people were buying it. And very high-flying people were even buying ultrasound machines to keep at home and look at their babies. But none of them are advised. Actually, they are discouraged by all professional societies at this point in time. But technology is evolving, and the technology may get to a place where it will be able to give us better at a financial position, which will be more affordable to people. And then that might be just a matter of time before that comes in. So today, I think technology has become an integral part of it. And I think it's not going to end with COVID. I think when people have experienced the ease of going through all of this through the net and the net consultation, it is going to stay. And I think Tier 2 cities, Tier 3 cities are where we are dealing with. And definitely, we think that it's here to stay. And increased access to physicians and facilities. You have no need to travel, and less cost and more effective healthcare system will evolve out of it. And I'm pretty sure of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mridubhashini. If there are any questions from the audience, please enter it in the chat box and we will certainly take it up. And if you can direct it to a specific panelist of your choice. I now we'll go to the next topic, diabetology. As you know, we have at least 70 million individuals in India requiring management of their blood sugars. Today, awareness of diabetes is at an all-time high. The majority of diabetics perhaps may not require specialist opinion, but then a significant number do. It is well known that diabetes affects every system in the body. I think that obtaining virtual consults will considerably help in prevention, early diagnosis, and management of diabetic neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, etc. Hundreds of papers have been published worldwide, including, I was very pleasantly surprised to see this, several from India using control studies that very clearly show that when diabetics consult from their homes or offices, there is better adherence and compliance. More testing of HbA1c is done, reduction in hospitalization, reduced costs, fewer complications. Tele-education, tele-counseling can be done in a one-to-many, as was demonstrated by the previous speaker, and are also easier to do. Before I hand over to Dr. Modi, I would just like to mention that we are doing a very major public-private partnership, what is called the Mukhyamantri Eye program with the government of Andhra Pradesh, where we have done more than 370,000 fundus examinations remotely by 30 ophthalmologists from Chennai, and a computer-generated color report is provided with a turnaround time of 15 to 30 minutes. This would have been unbelievable even a few years ago. And I'm particularly happy that Dr. Modi is also actively involved in this. And I request you to share your personal experience, not only in the remote diagnosis and reporting of diabetic retinopathy, but how, as an endocrinologist, you have made use of this, and you, for all practical purposes, you have an on-site ophthalmologist to look at the retina of your patient. Please do elaborate on this and the various other uses in which you are using telemedicine, specifically in the management of diabetes.
So, thank you, Dr. Ganapati. Thank you, Dr. Mridubhashini. And I thank Mankind people to organize this lovely symposium. Actually, telemedicine in post-COVID area time has totally changed our practice. And I think even this webinar, instead of CME, should also be included in telemedicine. So in my practice, I divide it into 3 parts: telemedicine per se, teleconsultation, and webinars. So these webinars also we enjoy like anything. And I always give example that webinar is like if you compare watching a cricket match live versus TV. So on TV, definitely we enjoy because clarity is so much. Same way in webinar also, if all are engaged totally, audio as well as video, both part, then clarity is much more. And utility of timing is also much more, including expenses are also much lesser. So I think even when pandemic is over, after that also this webinar should be continued, and it should not be only CMEs. In my field is basically endocrinology. My 50% practice is diabetes and 50% endocrinology. In that mainly thyroid, growth patient, reproductive endocrinology, and other some pediatric endocrinology problem. Yes, pre-COVID area, we were using telemedicine for not for consultation purpose. I will like to share 2-3 slides. I'll share my screen if you permit, and I will show you that how we use this telemedicine, and I 1 minute. So basically, yes, we were also using like fundus. It is said that diabetic patient, everything should be at one place, including ophthalmology service, including surgeon service, and all other department service. But that is not possible everywhere. And most of the time you have a diabetes clinic, and you will like to avail service from other specialty also, and especially ophthalmologist service and surgeon service. So we planned this, like we had one fundus camera. Our technicians were trained for that, to how to take fundus camera. But for opinion purpose, we need expert opinion. And for that, what we tied up with one of the ophthalmologists, and he was also using same format, and we were doing fundus photography, and we used to send it digitally, like through mail. And within half an hour, we used to get report. And when patient is in clinic, within half an hour, he used to get report. So we like this. This was 500 patients data, and initially it was difficult to convince the editor that this is a telemedicine usage. But afterward, yes, repeated argument and counter argument, we could convince, and we could publish this data about use of telemedicine, like all this fundus photography report. And we can see that long-standing diabetic, they have, our experience is very, very limited in comparison to what Dr. Ganapathy says, that thousands of patients, but is still in periphery, especially in practice like this, telemedicine is helping us. And that is a great advantage for us. And during this mainly teleconsultation, like it is, we can see it in both patient's perspective and clinician perspective. As Dr. Ganapathy said, for patient, it is a big boon, especially for elderly patient when they don't have to move, and they can consult a doctor. And timing wise also, Abhishek showed the survey data that timing wise we can adjust. Doctor has adjustment. You can, our patients are very compliant and cooperative. So even if you postpone your timing of consultation, they don't mind. So in what way we practice is a mixture of all these three things. Like for interaction purpose, we use WhatsApp, video call we do. For payment purpose, we use Google Pay. And for prescription purpose, we use a platform like Drona app or HealthPlix app. So first patient will feed the data, and then we will feed it in our this software. And then finally, we will send the prescription. So for patient is very happy once he gets a prescription, official prescription with signature. But my personal experience is that in comparison to, like generally in endocrinology is totally outdoor based practice, and consultations are very fast. But teleconsultation is taking little more time than real consultation. So I don't think that, yes, telemedicine will progress, and it will survive, it will continue. but I don't think that it can replace one-to-one real life consultation. That to my feeling is it will not, it cannot replace it. And diabetic, especially like survey was showing that yes, follow-up patient is very easy on teleconsultation. Yes, our experience is also same only, that all the patient who are in follow-up, the things are very easy. You have to adjust the medicine, you have to see the report, adjust the medicine, and explain the patient and send it. So that is very, very easy. But in diabetes practice, especially if somebody has not received insulin, especially in COVID-19 time, like glucocorticoids have become mainstay of treatment for moderate to severe COVID. And especially during this time, they require glucocorticoids and their sugar go haywire. So if we have to initiate insulin, we are finding it difficult, especially only through telemedicine. Yes, we have some video clips, we explain them, but if somebody has not received insulin anytime, then first time it is a bit difficult. And other thing is that many type 1 diabetic patients, they land up with ketoacidosis. And such patients, we really, it is not that all diabetic ketoacidosis patients we always admit. In type 1, ketoacidosis and ketone formations are very, very common. So many patients, without admission only, we try to manage if it is mild to moderate by adjusting insulin and by advice for rehydration. So such patient, at least we need to see once. Why? Because we have to check their ketones, we have to assess their dehydration status, and we have to check their electrolytes. So such patient, we insist that at least patient should come once, and only telemedicine management may not give full justice. The rest of the, like as madam said, that many pregnant ladies, gestational diabetes, they pay first visit, we explain them insulin, and then all throughout we manage them through this teleconsultation. So that is not a problem, and that is very easy, and most of the pregnant ladies are very, very compliant. So diabetes in that way, the complicated diabetes with complications are difficult to manage, but most of the time follow-up cases are easy. The easiest thing for to manage on telemedicine is like thyroid patient. Most of them, they convey like 2 minutes, we'll have a talk, and then we will have their TSH report and adjusting medicine, and then calling them is very, very easy. So hypothyroidism management, I find it very easy. Hyperthyroidism also to some extent, yes, but if somebody has not received medicine anytime, first time detected, and if they have significant ophthalmopathy, then better to see once. Once we insist that yes, once I have to see, and then yes, afterward we can manage. So follow-up cases in such scenario also, follow-up cases are easy to manage. And growth problem, yes, like just 4-5 days back only, I had a call from one patient that just as per advice, they are continuing. Patient is growth hormone deficiency patient, and the child is on growth hormone for last 6-7 months, and parents were telling that last 3 months because of COVID time they could not come, and they feel that child is not doing that well like what he was doing earlier. So in such case, we on telemedicine, it is very, very difficult to advise. And I said that once I need to see, because we have to check their all these anthropometry data personally, and then only it should come to conclusion that really child is not doing well. And if child is not doing well, what is the cause? I have to see their pen device, whether they are using it regularly, and correctly or not, and correct dosage is there or not, and other investigation like IGF-1 and other testing, whether they are required or not. So such cases, we insist that personal visit is required. And complex endocrinology problem, like for example, just 15 days back, one patient said, one girl's parents, they called me that we want to have one teleconsultation, and that is about this premature development in our daughter, that she is only 9 years, and we think that she has a significant breast enlargement and height spurt is there. So I straightway said that I need to see once. Such cases on telemedicine is difficult. So yes, so many opportunities are there in telemedicine, but there are some limitation also. And that limitation, if we keep in mind, then 80% of cases we are able to manage through teleconsultation. Only in 20% cases, I feel that yes, I need to see patient personally. And I think that is perfectly all right. So this is all to my opinion about utility of telemedicine, teleconsultation, and webinars in endocrinology practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Modi. We all know that India has only 5% of the 90,000 cardiologists required. 4,500 cardiologists are obviously insufficient for 1.3 billion hearts. At the same time, we have 1 billion mobile phones and 580 million internet subscriptions. Today, digital stethoscopes to facilitate teleauscultation are made in India. The new slogan is "Make for the World." 12-lead ECGs, echocardiograms, and even angiograms, coronary angiograms can all be transmitted electronically. It's my privilege to request Dr. Bhupen Desai to elaborate on how specialist or second opinion from a cardiologist can be given to the family physician by reviewing investigations remotely and also some type of physical findings. Request Dr. Desai to educate us on the specific uses of telemedicine in the field of cardiology. I just remembered that our pediatric cardiologist who was with us, Dr. Prem Shekhar, I'm talking of 2001, when the world did not talk about tele-pediatric echocardiography, we had done more than 250 tele-echocardiograms for children in Aragonda, a village near Chittoor, from Apollo Main Hospital, Madras. We used an ISRO VSAT. This was in 2001. Unfortunately, we just did not publish this. Retrospectively, we were just too far ahead of the time. And I know that technology today is amazing. And Dr. Desai, please share with us your experience.
Thank you very much, sir. First, I would like to congratulate you because of your hard work of more than 2 decades. BC, that is before Corona, telemedicine was really ripe at the India stage. So when Corona came in, Niti Aayog as well as Medical Council of India immediately agreed to teleconsultation. This is all full credit goes to you. And we also adapted to telemedicine. I think any system, any device, any system will survive only if it is helpful to all the stakeholders. Now in telemedicine, there are 2 stakeholders, a doctor and a patient. How does it help a doctor in telemedicine? The first and foremost is your payment. I'll tell you, before this, we adapted to telemedicine, patient will call me at any time. Sir, my BP is 170 by 90. What can I do? Sir, my heart rate has gone up. Sir, I've got a chest pain. I'm getting perspiration. And I used to give some advice free of course. Most of them were known patients. And there was never any payment in this. The first most advantageous thing happened with telemedicine is doctor gets their payment. Many times patient call me, so I tell him, I'm busy with something now. Please, I'm sending you a link. Please take an appointment and then we'll speak on that appointed time. So first and foremost for the doctor is that he gets his payment. That free service is gone. Secondly, once the free service is gone, the misuse is also gone. Previously, patient used to have a lot of free consultations with the doctors. So they used to call up for even a small things. Now they've realized that if he has to talk to a cardiologist, he has to take an appointment through a teleconsultation app. So non-specific complaints have totally disappeared. The third biggest advantage for a doctor is he becomes a worldwide doctor. See, I practice in one corner of Mumbai and I'm known in that small suburb of Mumbai only. But now, thanks to teleconsultation, people know me all over the world. I'll give you an example. I have some patients whose parents are staying in Calcutta. Now, patient is very happy with my consultation. He is not happy with his doctor in Calcutta. So he does teleconsultation of his father through me by a tele app. Up till now, we had no such facility, but now he has it. So as a doctor, my reputation has spread all over the world. There are many senior citizens in our country whose kids have settled in USA, UK, Spain, and Japan. Now they want a good doctor to see them. And somehow I happen to see them. They know me. So they take appointment through their internet for a teleconsultation for their family members, their parents, their father, mother, and all those things. So first of all, your scope becomes worldwide. So I will summarize. You get your payment easily. Your privacy is not disturbed because you tell him that you call me between 6 to 8. I will be available on this app. Please take an appointment. We'll talk. So that at other time they don't call you. So your privacy is maintained and your field of reputation increases worldwide. Now, how does it benefit patient? Many benefits have been told. Okay, he will not get infected. He will not have to move out of the home. He will not have to sit in the consulting room. He will not be in contact with other patients. So he can prevent himself. He will not have to use public transport. That is the biggest thing. And plus, even if somebody wants to use it, somebody is very insistent that he wants to see me, doctor. I want to see you personally, but how will he come? In Bombay, Lifeline is local train. For the last 6 months, local trains are not running. Public transport is very skeletal. Hardly he can travel. He cannot travel. So he saves money on traveling and he saves effort on traveling. Then second thing is he can consult me from the comfort of his home. The biggest advantage is that my clinic times are such that many patients cannot come to my clinic either in the morning or in the evening because in Bombay, life is very difficult. They leave home very early, take a local train, go to the main city, work there and come back home late in the evening. By that time, my clinic is closed. So many of these people who could not come to me without taking a casual leave have started consulting me from the comfort of their office. He doesn't have to leave his office. He doesn't have to leave, forego his casual leave. He can consult me. The most important part is he doesn't have to dress up. People do consult me within a night dress and lungi from consult. The most important for cardiology is that you have to do triage. When you speak to the patient, you observe it. A good clinician needs to have very good observant eye, particularly in cardiology. When he's talking, is he becoming very breathless? You ask him, where is the pain? So he will show you pain is here. Then you realize it is not cardiac. When he says pain is here on the left side, then you know it may be cardiac. So by observing him, how he speaks, you can make out whether he is breathless or not breathless, whether he's suffering. Then I tell him to show his legs. So I assess pedal edema is there or not there. Now, home monitoring of blood pressure has become the standard of care, particularly in the metro cities. And that is what all the international societies have suggested. The measurement of office BP or clinic BP is not correct. And those home monitoring measurement of BP machines are very, very cheap now, easily available. It costs about 1,500 rupees to 1,800 rupees. So patient can easily monitor his blood pressure at home. He can check his pulse. That machine gives pulse also. Now, most of the patients have bought one small oximeter also. So you can easily see pulse, BP and oxygen level. By observing him, you can make out what is his respiratory rate. By looking at his face, by looking at his leg, you can make out whether there is a pedal edema. So you can easily identify whether he is suffering from congestive cardiac failure or not. Now, because of COVID, many of these patients have become very tense and very anxious. They don't have any cardiac problem, but they have complaints of cardiac pain, chest pain, breathing difficulty, perspiration. When I talk to them, a 29-year-old girl lady, today morning I spoke to her. Doctor, I'm getting a lot of chest pain. Where is the pain? She's showing me the right side. I'm getting perspiration. I could not see any perspiration. Then many times some patient complains of pain and I'm convinced that he has some genuine reason for having cardiac pain. Then I tell him to get an ECG from any nearby place. Now in most of the cities, there are small nursing homes, diagnostic centers where they can take an ECG and send it to me. Just they send me a picture by WhatsApp and I can see and tell you, this is a cardiac ECG or non-cardiac ECG, don't worry. Similarly, you don't require stethoscope at all. Now we have echocardiography. There is no need to hear murmur. Echocardiography will give you idea what is the heart pumping, what is the aortic stenotic murmur is there or not, or mitral murmur is there. Everything echocardiography can easily pick up. So he does it in local area, he does it in Calcutta, he does it in Chennai and sends me the report. And I can easily consult with him. And what Dr. Ganpati was saying, now most of the cardiac surgeries, patients always tend to take second opinion. They go to a doctor who does his angiography, he does echo test, everything. Now he advises him a bypass surgery. Now patient is not convinced. He wants a second opinion. So he sends me all the report and I go through it and I tell him whether you need surgery or whether you don't need surgery. It's very happy situation for the patient. He doesn't have to come to my clinic and he gets a easily second opinion. What most of our patients have done, we have done an angioplasty or we have done a bypass surgery. Your patient has suffered from myocardial infarction. Then he goes home. After that, we don't have to do much. I know this patient. Most of the follow-up patients are very easy in cardiac practice. So every month I call them to my clinic before this corona time. Now every month they call me. They take an appointment and they call me. And they show me that machine. What is his BP? What is his pulse? They show me the prescription. These are the medicines he's taking. When I see BP is slightly high, heart is slightly high, I tell him, increase the dose of beta blocker. You are taking 25 milligram of metoprolol, make it 50 milligram of metoprolol. He shows me slight pedal edema or something. Then I tell him, increase the dose of Lasix by half tablet. It becomes very easy for the patient. Plus, in a city like Bombay, the traffic is a big pain. Even if the local train starts and public transport comes, commuting from one place to other place takes at least 2 hours in Bombay. It's horrible. Bombay, Bangalore, any major city, commuting is very difficult, and commuting is difficult for the cardiac patients and sick patients. So if he has come to your clinic once or he has been admitted under you once, all the follow-up can be easily done on teleconsultation platform. It is not a difficult thing. And when you see this patient, when you talk to him, when you observe him, you can make out that patient is becoming breathless or he has difficulty. Then you call him to your clinic. That's once in a while you can call him to your clinic. And most of the reports, ECGs are done very easily everywhere now. We have some colleagues who provide that home ECG service. Some people does not have a close by nursing home or something. Then we send our colleague over there. They do ECG and they transmit it to me by WhatsApp. Secondly, we have a very low opinion about our rural population. They are very tech-savvy people. You look at your driver or other things, they are very smart. They keep transferring the money to their village by WhatsApp. They are very smart. They require a little bit of knowledge, that's all. So people from non-metro or even from rural area can easily consult you. Many times patient does not know anything. So I get a link and patient also gets a link. Patient does not know how to click that link. I click the link, the video starts and the patient can easily take the video and I can consult with him. So I've consulted a few rural patients also. It's very easy. Internet penetration is going to increase. 5G is coming. Geo internet has become very cheap. It has spread all over the world. And by 2021, we'll be getting 5G internet connectivity also. Internet connectivity all over India has improved significantly. It is only a matter of time. In a year or two, I think even almost all the villages will be linked. So they can easily consult you from any corner of the country. So in my opinion, in a cardiac patients, follow-up visits are almost going to be teleconsultation. Maybe yes. And first time when you see a patient, you always insist on a video consultation. That is what I do. And I keenly observe patient, how he is talking, whether he's becoming breathless or not. Sometimes I ask him to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If he's suffering from heart failure, he will say 1, 2, 3. Then I can make out. You can easily do triaging also. And you tell him that I cannot do consulting. Please come to hospital, please come to my clinic and I'll see you. So it becomes very, very easy. What we have to do as a cardiologist to increase the dose of BP medicine or decrease the dose of Lasix or something. That's all. After some time, we have to increase the dose of one blood pressure medicine also. It becomes very, very easy for cardiologists to do a teleconsultation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Desai. I think we are running short of time, but there are a lot of interesting questions. So some of them are overlapping, some of them are specific. I will answer the very easy answers, which are very easy. The more difficult answers, I will take it later. Can government doctors practice in this platform who are taking non-practicing allowances? Honestly, I am not competent to answer that question. Health is a state subject. And within the health department itself, there are different rules. Whoever asks this question, I suggest you ask the head of your institution. He would be the right person to answer the question. Now, there are at least 5, 6 questions here regarding medico-legal issues. I am a little surprised at these questions. Prior to March 25th, yes, it was a gray area. Most of us have been practicing telemedicine for 20 years, purely on the premise that our conscience is clear, we are not doing anything wrong, and that whatever is in the interest of the patient, we are doing using technology. But from March 25th, the rules are extremely clear. The guidelines are pretty good. Of course, several amendments need to be made. The Telemedicine Society of India has already submitted proposals for various amendments. But to all these people who have asked questions on medico-legal, I would strongly recommend you, because it's impossible for me to tell you on this webinar. It's very easy. MOH, Ministry of Health and Family Planning, Family Welfare, mohfw.gov.in. And on the home screen, on the opening page, there will be a telemedicine practice guidelines. It's a 52-page document, but it's not that difficult to read. That answers most of your questions. One doctor has asked that can an Indian doctor with a RMP, a registered medical practitioner in India, who is currently in the United States, can he give a teleconsultation to a patient in India? A very good question, but this is specifically excluded in the telemedicine practice guidelines. The telemedicine practice guidelines does not make any mention of the legality or otherwise of an Indian or a non-Indian giving a consultation physically to a patient in India or the doctor outside India, various permutations, combinations. This is not mentioned. Personally, my philosophy has been, so long as there is no regulation which specifically tells you not to do something, and so long as you think that whatever you're doing is in the patient's interest, and all this are recorded, I do not see anything illegal just because the practice guidelines do not specifically refer to this. This is, of course, an individual decision which needs to be taken. One of the things which I want to emphasize based on several of the questions asked is, medicine is not black or white. It's various shades of gray. We need to understand that it's impossible to pass a single rule or give a recommendation. Everything has to be contextual. Now, I'll give you an example. Somebody here has asked, can you give a fitness certificate through telemedicine? Now, this depends entirely on the context. I have personally done about 2,500 neurological, neurosurgical teleconsultations in the last 18, 20 years. Now, 90% of this has been for review patients, for patients whom I have operated, patients whom I have admitted, patients whom I have physically seen. About 10 to 15% of the patients are new patients. But again, 90% of these new patients are referred to me by a general physician or by a neurologist or somebody. In other words, you are giving a second opinion with the data given to you. So when an MRI is shown to me and I talk to the patient, examine the patient, I do not necessarily have to do a perianal anesthesia. I do not necessarily have to test his knee jerk and ankle jerk. It depends entirely on the context. And I expect any teleconsultant, MBBS or MCS, DM, PhD, whatever it is, any teleconsultant, I expect him or her, and this is what I tell all the hundreds of doctors who give teleconsultations from our group of hospitals, that they must have the clinical judgment, the clinical wisdom to decide whether on that particular day, at that particular time, under the circumstances, based on where the doctor is located, where the patient is located, based on the actual condition for which a teleconsultation is sought, teleconsultation is the right thing or not. I am not, though I am an evangelist, I'm passionate about telemedicine. I am not for a moment suggesting that telemedicine should or will replace a face-to-face consultation. Certainly not. There are indications where only a face-to-face consultation should be done. One thing which I would like to emphasize again and again is, please, please, please never ever force or strongly insist on a teleconsultation if the patient does not want it. There will be issues later. You try to persuade, try to convince the patient, but the patient still doesn't want to do it. Please do not force it. Finally, it is a patient's prerogative. Several questions have been asked regarding physical examination. How can I give a teleconsultation without a physical examination? The answer, sir, is entirely contextual. Now, I'll give you an example. When I joined medical college 53 years ago, There was no ultrasound, there was no CT, nothing. And even today, I'm not a general surgeon, but still I would probably be more comfortable with doing a rectal examination to find out if my clinical impression of a benign enlargement of the prostate. A student who is absolutely familiar with a 4D ultrasound, he may be much more at home with a pelvic ultrasound, which tells him the different lobes of the prostate, which I certainly may not be able to make out in a physical examination. So it depends on the context, it depends on the individual. Some doctors may like to palpate an ascites, palpate an abdomen to see if there is hepatosplenomegaly or ascites. But another doctor may be quite happy with the ultrasound, maybe quite, as the cardiologist, Dr. Desai just now said, I mean, by looking at the abdomen, I can find out if the abdomen is full or not, if there is a suspicion of ascites or not. Now, whether this additional information is going to materially change the clinical management, that is what is important. So if a single physical examination is going to totally change your clinical management, yes, you're absolutely right. Please stop the teleconsultation. Do not proceed with the teleconsultation. So there cannot be a single answer to all these questions. It is entirely contextual. I may decide on a teleconsultation, but on an identical problem several months later, now the internet connectivity is not good, the audio is not good, the video is not good. I'm not 100% satisfied with the quality of the images. I'm not able to digitally manipulate the CT, MRI, etc. I will not give an opinion. So the bottom line is clinical judgment. Do whatever is in the patient's interest. Do it in good faith. Please do not worry about medico-legal, particularly right now, the pandemic, the Epidemic Diseases Act has been passed. And so long as this act is not denotified, let me assure you that the government, the law very clearly states that no action can be taken against a medical doctor during a pandemic if there has been an inadvertent procedural lapse. If what you have done is basically wrong, yes, of course, you will be taken to task. But please do not worry about medico-legal. Do what you think is in the interest for the patient. I think so. My take-home message would be, everything is contextual, depends, and things are going to change, things are going to evolve. And I'm sure in 5 years from now, we are not going to have webinars like this where somebody will have to promote and sell telemedicine. Probably 5 years from now, we will have to, particularly the older people like us, we will have to tell them that clinical medicine is not yet dead, that you still need to get a history, you still need to do a physical examination. There's one question from one of the audience members who was very concerned about, if I may use the word TLC, he feels that using technology, the ability to communicate with the patient will be lost. Sir, I totally disagree with you. It depends on you, the individual, the body language. See, and please, several people have made statements that patients come from villages, they are illiterate, etc. I beg to disagree. I have had more problems in explaining to the so-called elite, most sophisticated people from Chennai about the differences between the natural history of multiple secondary deposits in the brain and why it doesn't really make sense to treat them. Whereas the so-called illiterate poor person from a remote village, he is much more practical. And I honestly think all of us know that formal education, formal literacy has nothing to do with your ability to handle a healthcare situation. And I think people from so-called rural areas are far more intelligent, far more competent. And again, as Dr. Desai mentioned, I think most people in the so-called villages are much more familiar with WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, and all sorts of things which I am not familiar with. I honestly do not know the intricacies of digital payment, but they know everything about different types of digital payment. Again, one question was asked on, sorry, 1 minute, let me just go through it. Physical examination, dental field. Is telemedicine have any future in dental field? The answer to this, it does not have a future. It's already the past. tele-dentistry can be practiced. I understand there are at least 10 subspecialties in MDS. When I was a student, there was only MDS had just started. Today, there are 10 subspecialties in MDS, each a 3-year course. So there is a great opportunity for a BDS or for one MDS to ask opinion in cosmetic dentistry, in various other things, etc. And intraoral cameras are extremely inexpensive, 5,000 rupees, 100 megabyte storage capacity in that. So teledentistry is extremely simple. Of course, the telemedicine practice guidelines only covers MCI. The Ayush group of doctors are totally covered by the MCI, but to the best of my knowledge, the Dental Council of India has not yet issued a notification. So that is something which is not clear. And I think I've addressed most of the topics. Let me quickly go through it. I think so. If there's any other question, Dr. Rajat?
I think, sir, most of the questions have been covered, and I think we can take a call to close this session now. But yeah, I would request our panelists, our experts, to have quick closing remarks. I would request Dr. Govindarajan, Dr. Desai, and Dr. Modi to give their closing remarks. We start with Dr. Desai. Dr. Desai, your quick closing remarks.
Yeah, I'm greatly convinced about this telemedicine. In our, at least, medical field, it is quite a sensitivity. It's a necessity, I would say. We deal with non-communicable chronic disease like blood pressure. Half of my patients are diabetic, as Dr. Modi has said. He just tells me what is his blood sugar, what is his blood pressure, and I advise them the medication. So for a non-communicable chronic disease, telemedicine is going to be the future. We need to see patient once or twice initially, and then all follow-ups can be easily done on telemedicine platform. It's very, very easy. It gets you your payment without any hesitation, because sometimes patient directly calls you and you are bound to answer those questions, and then he forgets to pay. The only hitch I find in telemedicine in Indian context is somehow when they speak to you on phone, they doesn't like to pay you. First of all, there's the Indian mentality. That needs to change. That needs to change. And once you tell them to come through the app, that mentality will have to be forcibly changed. So they will be calling you at fixed time and they'll be paying you for your fees. And eventually it is very, very win-win situation for both the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can we have remarks from Dr. Modi? Dr. Modi? Sir, if you could unmute yourself, you are on mute. If you could just unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, sir, you are audible.
So I think telemedicine, not only pre-COVID and COVID, but even post-COVID time also, telemedicine will survive. And especially in field of endocrinology and diabetes, most of the cases are cold cases, and many of them are follow-up cases. So telemedicine will definitely have a long-lasting future beyond this pandemic time. And patient satisfaction and clinical satisfaction is also quite good. So it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam, if we could have your comments also. Madam, you would have to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Okay. I'm also of the opinion that it's here to stay. Like I said, it's a clear and present future for all of us. And I think we'll have to look at it that way. It's not that it's going to replace traditional medicine in any kind of a way. And we have to make in our own specialties, in our own way, what can be treated this way or what can be dealt with in this way and what cannot be dealt with in this way. But however, a pregnant woman who doesn't want to travel all the time and come and sit in a very crowded office and can get your opinion, and if it's only for counseling and opinions, fine. A teenager with a PCOS who doesn't want to be seen with a lot of pregnant patients in a clinic, but really wants to know about PCOS, you can do that very well in a consultation. So there are many, many situations, clinical situations, where that 15 minutes or 20 minutes that you spend with them in a focused way, communicating with them and answering those questions, I think it's making them much more happy than in a busy clinic where you're compelled to see, also pay attention to a lot of other things. And I think it's definitely here to stay.
Thank you, madam. I think we have
Dr. Desai wants to say something.
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think since I was a cardiologist, I confined my discussion on cardiology only. But the biggest advantage of telemedicine is in the COVID era. Thousands, not thousands, lakhs of people are staying at home now. They are home quarantined. They are worried. They are consulting their doctors on phone only. Doctor doesn't want him to come to his clinic. Patient doesn't want to move out of the house. So biggest benefit of telemedicine now is in the COVID medicine. Thousands and lakhs of people are being treated for COVID at home through telemedicine only.
Right, sir. Right. So we have an enthralling panel discussion, but before we close, I would sincerely like to thank our moderator, Professor K. Ganpati, for sharing his rich experience. And I would also sincerely thank our esteemed panel of experts, Dr. Desai, Dr. Modi, and Dr. Govindrajan, for sharing their all-important opinions and their insights. And last but not the least, I thank all the attendees for sparing their valuable time and logging in for this all-important session. I'm told that we have more than 13,000 attendees who have joined this. To be specific, 13,826 is the number who have logged in. So that's huge. So thank you one